Trying to determine the best cartridge overall length for accuracy is not a new topic, but the way we're going to find it today is quite different than I've ever heard it explained in the past. In today's video, I'm going to go over my results when using Eric Cortina's procedure for finding the best cartridge overall length in his Chasing the Lands is Stupid video. Stick around. Most of us reloaders have a common goal. We're all trying to achieve the best performance possible. We read endless articles, watch endless videos about the subject, trying to see if there is something we can do to optimize our reloading process to make these groups just a little bit smaller. Agreeing on how to actually do this is where a lot of it gets lost on this topic. When reloaders start arguing the best way of doing something, I often see people are getting to the same answer, just taking different ways of getting there. At least in my mind anyway. I'm not here to tell anyone to change, especially if you're getting the results that you're looking for. If you're happy and you know it, shoot your groups. But I want to start today by being very clear. My intention of today's video is to evaluate a new way of testing that I am not accustomed to. I'm not telling you it does or doesn't work. You be the judge of that. I'll summarize my experience at the end, but if you're interested in this, I'll just ask you, keep an open mind, look at the data for what it is. It's one test, my experience with it, and the results that I achieved with it. I have no intention of disparaging anyone's process. If you're new to reloading and you're thinking of trying this out, I would encourage you to try different methods to find which works best for you. My opinion or anyone else's frankly doesn't matter. The results you get on your target are what I would recommend you concentrate on. Whenever it comes out with a new article or a video about how to make your group smaller and how to do your load development faster, I get messages and comments of how I need to change everything that I'm doing immediately. Frankly, I enjoy most of these comments because I can't possibly keep track of everything that's posted on the internet. However, that doesn't mean that I need to change everything I'm doing immediately either. If I want to know how something works, I'm going to try it and I'm going to test it. I don't want to distract too much from the main topic of today's video either, but there's lots of methods for determining the best cartridge overall length. In the not too recent past, there's been some recent work published by Cal Zant on the Precision Rifle blog. There are a series of articles he posted from March 21st to April 28th of 2020 discussing cartridge overall length, barrel erosion, and projectile jump. He summarizes several publications on their advice on how to test, different people's theories, and a whole bunch of different results. If you enjoy reading articles on this, I encourage you to check out his blog. I'll link in the description box below. He has lots of references in his video, but two of the ones he used are the same two that we have on the table today. The Berger Manual as well as Glenn Zedeker's Top Grade Ammo. Berger's Manual has a little bit of an interesting process that talks more about how to do your testing, but its initial test they talk about actually moving in 40 thousandths increments when shooting your groups to zero in on that ideal cartridge overall length. But that's not what we're trying out today. For today's test, this method was put forth by Eric Cortina in his Chasing the Lands is Stupid video. If you haven't heard of Eric Cortina, just Google him. I don't want to insult him by attempting to list his accomplishments, but he certainly has done some winning. When guys that know how to win talk, I try my best to listen. There's a good chance that they may know a thing or two that I just haven't learned yet. We're going to summarize this real quick, but if you don't want the Crib Notes version, I would encourage you to check out his video as well, just to get all the details. You might even want to watch the video more than once. I know that I did. But for today, the quick summary of Eric's method, or at least my best interpretation of it, is the following. Number 1. The first step you need to accomplish is finding jam, or at least a safe point you know you can start in your rifle. Step 2. Subtract 20 thousandths from your jam point and load 3-shot groups decreasing in overall length in 3 thousandths increments. Technically, we're going to be measuring this in CBTO because simply it's more consistent than relying on the overall length of the projectiles. Step 3. Shoot our groups and look for accuracy nodes where we have consecutive small groups, not one small group surrounded by big groups. He hasn't really discussed this in his video, but logically, after you find those small groups, I would shoot a larger sample just to verify the results you're going to get at that cartridge overall length. But the first thing we need to do is run our test, and that's what we're doing in today's video. Our example today is going to be using the 140 grain ELDM by Hornady. The video I released last week covers exactly how I found jam. Jam is neck tension dependent, so I ended up taking the neck tension value from the .263 mandrel, which if you look at the chart on your screen, was 2.270 inches. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a link in the description box below, but the chart I'm going to throw on your screen right now is the dimensions you need to know. When simply using the Hornady overall length gauge, the touch point I measured was 2.222 inches. The 2.63 inch mandrel gave us a jam CBTO of 2.270 inches, or a cartridge overall length jam of 2.8905 inches. We're going to be using the jam CBTO measurement of 2.270 inches, subtracting 20 thousandths, and so our testing today will start off with a CBTO of 2.250 inches. And we will continue to move further away from our jam point in 3,000 steps. Our test platform for today's testing is a Ruger Precision Rifle chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. The barrel is a aftermarket from White Oak Precision and is 26 inches in length. The load we're testing today is safe in my rifle, maybe not in yours, so make sure you're following appropriate loading procedures. The load we're testing today is using the 140 grain ELDM, part number 26331. The brass we're using is once fired liable brass, full length size, bumping the shoulder back 2 thousandths. The neck tension is being set with a .262 inch mandrel from 21st Century. The primer for today is the CCI 41 small rifle primer. And the CBTO is what we're varying today. We're going to be starting at 2.25 inches and moving down to 2.205 inches in 3 thousandths increments. This can provide us a cartridge overall length testing from 2.870 inches down to 2.25 inches. 16 groups in all today. All groups are 3-shot groups except for the last 2, which I made 4-shot groups. The load data for today have actually worked well for me in several platforms. Generally, you would run today's test after you've found a good primer-powder combination that's going to provide you low standard deviation and extreme spread numbers before you actually perform this tuning procedure. I don't want to cover every piece of gear that it took to do the reloading process, but I do want to make one point that our cartridge overall length was dialed in with my Forester micrometer seating die. If you're going to attempt running a test like this, having a micrometer die where you can actually dial in 3 thousandths increments very easily and repeatably sure makes the process easier. I'm not going to tell you you can't do it with a different die, but something like this sure makes it easy. One thing before we get to the groups for today's testing, I would ask that you keep your expectations in check. If you run this test and your projectiles don't all end up in the same hole, the rifle or the shooter just might not be capable of that. But you still might be able to use this process to improve your results. Because there's really a lot of groups to look at today, I really was trying to think of the best way to review them. But to be honest, looking at groups is very subjective. So we're just going to be looking at these groups individually, and then we're going to try and look at the big picture, including some charts at the end. For reference, all these groups were shot at 100 yards. At our starting CBTO of 2.25, our first group was .342 MOA. At a CBTO of 2.247, our second group was .664 MOA. Moving on to 2.244, that group was .444 MOA. At a CBTO of 2.241, .794 MOA. Moving 3 thousandths more, 2.238. Yielded a 2.53 MOA group. At 2.235, we increased again to .658 MOA. Moving on to a CBTO of 2.232 inches, .384 MOA was what we achieved. At a CBTO of 2.229 inches, .296 MOA is what was achieved. Moving on again at 2.226 MOA, .354 MOA was what was achieved. At a CBTO of 2.223, the result was .725 MOA. At 2.22 inches, .461 MOA. 2.217 inches yield a .318 MOA group. At 2.214 inches yielded a .566 MOA group. At a CBTO of 2.211 inches, .529 MOA was what was achieved. Our first 4-shot group at a CBTO of 2.208 inches, .839 MOA was what was achieved. And our last 4-shot group of the day at 2.205 inches yield a .268 MOA group. So now that we have all these fun results, what do we do next, right? Well, we want to confirm the load, but let's pull up a chart because I like charts. This chart actually is charting the group size and MOA versus the CBTO of the rounds tested. In Eric's video, he kind of talks about the results being somewhat like a sine wave, big groups and small groups. And as we look at the chart, the first interesting spot I see is a CBTO of 2.238 inches. This is where I've actually loaded this ammo combo many times, but since we see that there are bigger groups on both sides of it, we're going to keep looking. Looking at a CBTO of 2.232 and 2.226, we have 3-shot groups, .384 MOA and under. And to me, that looks very promising. And in my opinion, where I think we should test next. It seems like every time I run a test like this, I always wish there was just one more data point. And today is no exception to that. Almost the best group of today was a CBTO of 2.205 inches, and that was a 4-shot group. If we tested a CBTO of 2.202 and saw small groups, that may be a very interesting place to load as well. Another interesting point that our chart demonstrated perfectly in today's test is the advice that we don't want to just be touching the lands. Be in them or out of them. If we look back at our chart, the CBTO touch point was 2.222 inches, and we saw the group we shot at 2.223 inches. That 3-shot group was almost 3/4 MOA. Certainly not our best group, and according to our chart, a fine place to avoid. So we've looked at all 16 groups. What are we going to do next? We need to do some larger sample size. I think somewhere around a CBTO of 2.230, 2.231 might be where we actually want to load. Having the luxury of having 3 relatively small groups all right in a row, and our best group being at that CBTO of 2.229 really makes me want to stay closer to that group. I'm also very tempted to extend our chart somewhat, really wanting to know what would have been that next group since our CBTO of 2.205 looked so good, and being a 4-shot group certainly tempts me to find out what the next data point is and see what results we might get there. That might be a very narrow node, but we're not going to know unless we test. Overall, in running this test, I think we were fairly successful. If you're thinking about trying this method out, and I certainly think it's worth trying out, you might want to check out the video I did on how exactly I found my jam measurement for today's testing. If you guys have performed this test, let me know what your results were in the comment section below. If there's some additional testing that you guys are specifically interested in when it comes to using this method, let me know that in the comments section below as well. Subscribe if you like to watch more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope to see you come back next week. And until then, stay safe in small groups.